Around 7 Thursday evening, October 29th, 1998, people began filling seats in Rice University's Hamman Hall. They were gathered to hear Houston broadcaster and writer Rob McKinnon engage in a conversation with the award-winning author of Ishmael, Daniel Quinn. The title of the event was Hope, a Dialogue with Daniel Quinn. Mr. McKinnon calls Quinn's books the first of the great books of the 21st century, and he predicts that because of the power, importance, and provocativeness of Quinn's ideas and writing, he will come to be thought of as the 21st century's most dangerous man in the world. Join us now as the audience welcomes Rob McKinnon and Daniel Quinn.
Thank you. Thank you, and good evening. Daniel, it is such an honor and a pleasure to be with you, and I've spent the past weeks reading all of the books, and it has been one of the greatest experiences of my life. It has changed so much of my thinking. Let me begin our conversation, our journey, by asking you really a very simple question to start with. Where is the hope?
Well, this is one of the themes of all of my books, is this. One of the reasons why so many people feel hopeless right now is that they have been listening to Mother Culture, who teaches that this thing that we have right here was destined from the beginning of the universe, and that we had to do this, and that being human means doing this. And so, if we are indeed headed towards extinction, as it appears, then what can you say? We were destined to become extinct after just a few thousand years of civilization. And my message is completely different from that, which is that we, the people of this particular culture, are not humanity itself. We are only one culture out of tens, probably hundreds of thousands of cultures that have lived on this planet from the beginning of human life. And that all of these other cultures did not destroy the world. We are not required to destroy the world. We're not compelled to destroy the world. It isn't our fate to destroy the world. It isn't our destiny to destroy the world. And to me, that's the greatest message of hope that there is.
Yes, indeed. Let me back up for a moment, though, to the beginning of all this. I know that anyone who's read your books will want to know what was going on in your life before the gorilla.
Well, of course, that was about some 50 years there, pre-gorilla. This is a question that is always asked in every group that I've ever been in, so I will take some time to talk about this, since I know that people are evidently interested. This has been a lifelong project, even though I didn't know during most of that time that I was going to end up writing a book. But I began the investigation that resulted in Ishmael probably when I was still in school, and questioning many things that I saw. But it began more formally when I went into educational publishing in the beginning of the 60s. And at a young age, I was 25 or thereabouts, and began to relive what children go through in school. And I mean small children. We all remember high school, but not many of us remember the second grade, third grade, and so on. And going through that, I was really astounded by the things that we teach our children. And I began to try and figure out why we teach our children these things and why we teach them this way. I became intrigued by the fact that in societies that we call, in our wisdom, primitive, children at the age of 13 or 14 are capable of living on their own, are capable of living independently, and if their entire cultural support disappeared overnight, they would still survive very nicely. Whereas in our more advanced system, children get out of high school with a survival value close to zero. And this is seen by most people to be a defect of our educational system. And it took me a number of years of thinking and reading to realize that it's not a defect. It is a design feature of our educational system. It's a design feature because we want children, when they get out of high school, to be forced into the economic system that we have. In other words, be forced to get a job because they have no way to live independently. They must immediately find someone to start paying them money so they can get the things they need to live. So it's no accident that our children do not get out of school capable of living independently. This was only one of things that got me started, and it actually this particular thing didn't find its way into any of my books until the most recent one, My Ishmael. As time went on, and about the mid-'70s, I began to think that I had the basis for a book, and began struggling and began to write books. And version 1 was called Man and Alien, and I won't even try to explain why. It was a limited success, and it was the only one of the series that was a limited success until quite late. And I started a second that was called The Genesis Transcript, and I gave up on that after 1,000 pages because I knew that after 1,000 pages I was nowhere near where I was heading. I threw that away and started another version with the same title, and the same thing happened. But I was learning a great deal. I was discovering what it was I was trying to say. I started a fourth version called The Book of Nahash, kind of a lame sort of half novel, and couldn't quite finish it. And then I said, well, since I seem to have difficulty finishing these books, why don't I start a book that has a beginning but no end? So I started The Book of the Damned, and I began to issue it in parts, thinking that I could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just keep going that way. But unfortunately, I got stuck after 3 parts. And then I wrote a book called Another Story to Be In. And this was the first time that I struck the idea that we are living a story, that we are enacting a story, that every culture is enacting its own individual story. And up until then, I had not formulated that idea. And so Another Story to Be In was the first success, but it was unpublishable. It was not, and I rewrote that book in a shorter version, hoping to make it a little more attractive, and that was not a success either. And then came about the Turner Tomorrow competition, and Ted Turner was looking for a novel because he wanted to make a movie about a positive future for humanity. And so I rewrote this book for the first time as a true novel, and then it was when Ishmael was born. That was when the gorilla turned up, finally in 1990. This is an appropriate time to anticipate a question that will be asked. Why a gorilla? I was thinking tonight that I'll bet that no one ever asked Mary Shelley, why a doctor? For Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein. That's because it was evident that thematically it would not have worked if Victor Frankenstein had been, for example, a sorcerer. She could have written it as him being a sorcerer, but it would not have said the same thing, and the book would have disappeared very quickly. And Ishmael could have been written with a human teacher, and also that would have failed to say what I was trying to say, and it would have disappeared very quickly also. A gorilla was the right choice for the same reason that a medical doctor was the right choice for Frankenstein. Her theme was that there are secrets that science should not be exploring. And mine is that if we hope to survive here, we had better start listening to our neighbors in the community of life and not just to ourselves. And so that's why Ishmael is a gorilla and not a human.
One of the things that you talk about is culture, and mother culture, what you call mother culture. And I think at first blush, it's very difficult to read this material and not jump to the conclusion that you're talking about American culture or perhaps in a more expanded view, Western culture. But this is not at all what one comes to understand you to mean. And I wonder if you just talk about your concept of culture a little bit.
Yeah. We do have, there is a habit that we've gotten into in Western culture. I think it came up during the 60s when in the West, in England and America, everyone discovered the East. And it came to be understood that there was an enormous gulf between the East and West, which was a great benefit to the many elements of the East, and they promoted the idea, and a lot of people made a lot of money on the idea. So people began to talk more and more about Western culture, and especially whenever they had anything bad to say, it was always Western culture. And Eastern culture remained somehow rather ethereal and okay, and whereas Western culture was crass and materialistic and evil. But I'm looking at the matter in a more simple and general way. What it has also been a theme of mine to try to make people realize what a very, very, very peculiar culture we have. Of all the human cultures, ours is the only one where the food is under lock and key. This is why immediately for me, East and West are identical. Such a fundamental and very, 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 very peculiar thing. This is what unites us. Through East and West, people must work in order to coax that food out from beyond the lock and key. And in no other culture was this the case. There were cultures that practiced virtually the same kind of agriculture as we did, but never was food a commodity the way we have made it a commodity. And that alone unites us. Anywhere in the world you go, you will find people doing the same thing as we do. So I make no distinction between East and West.
All right, I'd like to ask you a question with regard to culture, another question. You talk about taker and leaver cultures. And I may ask you to expand on that in a moment. But when you look at the leaver cultures, what we would ordinarily think of as more primitive cultures from our perspective perhaps, I have to say that I don't know of any leaver culture that would have had someone in it that could have written Ishmael, would have created it, or been able to do many of the incredible things that our taker culture, in the broadest sense, has been able to do. And I know this bothers a lot of people. You know, if we returned, quote, to a leaver culture, would we wouldn't be going into space today. John Glenn would be out in the woods looking for berries and eating the bark off trees or something. Now, I don't believe this is what you mean, but I would like to have you address this.
It's certainly utterly true that, of course, you're doing what people generally do when they think of leaver cultures or leaver societies. They immediately think of hunting and gathering. The there were many civilizations that were started by lever peoples and never became what we are, but they had very high civilizations, as you know, a little as high as ours were at the same period of time. The Maya, for example, after 3,000 years, they had a very advanced culture, and had they cared to continue, there's no reason at all why they would not have ended up creating symphonic music and spaceships and everything else. But they quit. And it is generally, has for a long time been considered a great mystery that they would do such a thing as quit. And I feel that I have made an effort to explain why they quit. Is that they found what we find ourselves, is that they were not having a good time. And they saw where this was leading, and they did not like the arrangement of civilization, which is always hierarchical, which with a few people at the top who live very, very, very well, and then some people in the middle who live well, and then the great masses at the bottom who are the pack animals. And of course, the people at the top always think everything is very beautiful, but then the people at the bottom never think it's beautiful. And eventually, the Maya decided this was not worth pursuing. But if they had pursued it, there's no reason on earth why they would not have achieved the same things we did. So I don't think of our achievements as being particularly items belonging to the taker mentality or anything like that. The tape recorders are not taker inventions. Spaceships are not taker inventions.
Okay, this is a dangerous area to get into. We're not supposed to talk about religion and politics in our society, I guess, but I've got to ask you because it is so important. In the story of B, the B stands evidently, I don't think I'm giving too much away here, for blasphemy. So I'd like to know your thoughts on, has religion helped us? Has it hurt us? Is it an innate part of everyone's quest for an understanding of how we got here? And if it is that basic to us, I mean, how do we avoid the pitfalls? In 25 words or less.
There are a bunch of questions in there. What I'm saying in the story of B is, and I don't think I said it nearly loudly enough, because people have not gotten nearly upset enough, is that what we call the major world religions are all, without exception, religions of our particular culture. They are not humanity's religions. No missionary has ever gone into the jungle and discovered some Episcopalians living there. Or Buddhists, or Jews, and that they have a particular relationship to our culture. They are always trying to ameliorate the situation, always trying to talk us into being nicer people, into being more generous people, into being sweeter people, into being more lovable people, into being more gentle people, and always trying to get our eyes on higher things and to not be such swine. In the story of B, I point out that there was at one time a universal religion on this planet, and one that had been in place for tens of thousands of years, called animism, which is not one of the major world religions because it isn't the religion of our culture, and so we know nothing about it. Most people know very little about it, and I try in that book to grapple with that. I think that in trying to understand the universe and our place in it, I think is a religious activity, and I don't think there's a way of you can take the position that life has no meaning and that humanity has no meaning and nothing has any meaning, and that way avoid religious thinking of any kind. But the moment you say, well, what is this all about? What does it all mean? Is there a human destiny? Immediately you're thinking religiously, and I think that all peoples tend to, in their search for meaning and understanding, tend to be religious people.
This is sort of one of those little aside questions, but you wrote Ishmael as a novel principally because Ted Turner wanted it that way. That's pretty simple and pretty direct motivation. Now, prior to that, I know you had taken a very, I guess, almost didactic approach, I assume. I wonder if you've had any fear that because you made them novels, which by definition are fiction, that this might remove some of the impact of the ideas, which are, in fact, what the books are about.
Yes, I should say immediately that Rennie, my wife, had for years been saying, as she watched me struggling with this book, that I should try writing it as a novel. And I kept saying, oh, if I write it as a novel, people won't take the ideas seriously. And I was wrong on both points, and Rennie was right. And so it was the best thing in the world. It's true that I might not have ever written it as a novel if it hadn't been for the Turner thing, but that was the salvation of the book and the ideas and me, and that was the correct form for it. That was the only form in which I could actually realize what I was doing. Dialogue turned out to be the right teaching strategy for this. I just can't imagine doing it any other way. I wish I could. But some people, there's no question about this, some people are put off by the fictional elements, and many people recoil in horror from the gorilla. Oddly enough, it is young people who have the most difficulty with that. Interesting, and I'm not quite sure why. Perhaps they have less experience with willing suspension of disbelief. Someone wrote and said of his teacher, he said, well, I've known an awful lot of 12-year-old girls, and believe me, Julie Gerjak is just way, way too smart to be any real 12-year-old girl. And I wrote back and I said, well, you mean you can go for the telepathic gorilla?
In the first book, the question that a number of people have raised, or I guess a criticism, is that Alan Lomax, who's in his 40s, seems to be rather slow and dim-witted, especially compared to Julie, who seems to get things instantly and be zooming down the road. Alan is terribly resistant.
Yes, this had to be very carefully tuned. One of the reasons why there was a teacher and learner in the early versions of the book, in the Genesis transcript, and good old Murray, I miss Murray, but the guy was just too dumb. And that's why we got 1,000 pages in and we were nowhere, because he was just too dumb. And so I had to have a student who was smarter than Murray, but I was very much afraid that if he was too smart, people would get stuck too often and say, oh, I'm just not following this book, and put it aside. And it's partly an illusion, I think. Again, this is something that young people comment on quite often, is that they think Alan is really stupid. And that if they were having this conversation with this gorilla, they would have been much, much faster. Well, I don't know about that one. But by contrast, you see, the material in My Ishmael is, to my mind, much more difficult than the material in Ishmael, and that if it had been Alan in My Ishmael, the book would have been 1,200 pages. or something like that, because Julie is just a genius. There's no doubt about it. And I heard from one, I sent a manuscript copy to a teacher who had been using Ishmael in his classroom for some time, and he wrote back and he said, well, this would be too tough for my students. So.
The character of Jared Osborne, Father Jared Osborne, in the story of Dee, very much like Alan Lomax, I think, in a way. We have a man here who, though he seems to have great potential and to be very bright, he hasn't done much to realize his potential, to say the least. And he's also kind of reluctantly called into the situation where he's going to be exposed to all these ideas. I'm curious to know if that in any way, in your mind, is a metaphor for the people of our culture, all of us, that perhaps we're resistant or will be resistant to these ideas, or maybe are not even interested in finding out about them because we simply don't know how important this is.
No, I hadn't thought of it that way. I needed in that book, well, I've already spoken a little bit about what I was saying about our the meaning of our major religions, and in order to bring this out, I felt I needed to find someone who was committed already to one of those major religions, and the one of those major religions that is the one that holds on hardest is, of course, the Roman Catholic Church, and I chose that not. I showed. I had a copy of the book sent to an environmentalist whose name you would recognize, but I don't want to embarrass her, who to see if she would give me a quote for the book, and she wrote back and she said this book should be withdrawn from publication, and it's a slander against the Roman Catholic Church. And she clearly missed the point entirely, because I chose the Roman Catholics not in order to slander them, but because they are the only ones who are standing still and holding on to what they have believed from the beginning, more or less, and are not giving away to every new whim and not bending. Everybody says, well, you should have women priests. Well, they just won't. And if they start rewriting Roman Catholicism, before long it is not going to be one. There's going to be Roman, the first church of the Roman Catholics, and the second church of the Roman Catholics, and the third and the fourth, and they're going to go the way of all the others. And so I picked the Roman Catholics because they stand for something and will not back down. And so it was a tribute to them. And Father Lofra, who is the only real villain I've ever had in a novel, is not, to my mind, a villain at all, because I admire him because he was willing to become a criminal to do what he believed.
All right, let's move from religion to a safer topic, education. Particularly in my Ishmael, but in Providence as well, you talk about education. And you've mentioned a little bit about that tonight, but I'd like to expand more on it, because when you get to, I hate to use this term, the bottom line, some of the things you're saying, it seems to me that you're saying we should just shut down, you do say we should shut down the system, give all the teachers the financial wherewithal to go quietly into an early retirement, but basically shut down the system and open up the world to children much as the lever cultures would. Would you expand on that, please?
Yes. A woman, this is several years ago, long before I had any idea I would ever write my Ishmael, came to visit me from California in Austin, and we spent a couple hours together, and at the end of it she said, what do you think we ought to do about the schools? And I said, I think we should burn them down. And she said, well, you're kidding, aren't you? I said, no, I'm not kidding. And so I had to then, of course, explain to her why I felt that to be the case. The theory of our schools, of course, is that they prepare children for life in our society. And we all know what an atrocious job they do of that. And the point that I make in my Ishmael is that it's not an error that they do such an atrocious job. They do it by design. We want our children, when they come out of school, to go into the job market, and we want them to go in at the bottom. Of course we want them to go in at the bottom. We don't want them to come out and compete with their older brothers and sisters for jobs. We don't want them to compete with their parents for jobs. So they must start at the bottom. It's important that they come out with no skills. And all of the people who do the hiring say, we have to train them ourselves. They come to us completely untrained. Well, of course. That's the whole point. If they didn't, there would be we'd have a revolution. So if you actually wanted children to be able to function well in the society, you would open the society up to them and let them follow their noses into it and do all the things they want to do. And because I know that children are incorrigible learners. Anyone who's had a small child knows that during the first 4 or 5 years, they're just like sponges. You just can't stop them. You have to tie them up to make them leave things alone and stop playing with things, learning about things, going places where they shouldn't go, asking questions you don't know how to answer, and so on and so on. And then we send them off to school, and their learning curve drops very sharply. And then the educators say, well, see, that's why we have to send them to school. By a wonderful leap of mislogic. And that if we enable children instead of sending them to prisons where they have to learn in lockstep, learn things they don't care about, with in an order that makes no sense to them at all, learn stuff that makes no sense, and learn stuff that has no utility to them at all. If we opened the world up to them, made it possible for them to go where they wanted to go and learn the things they really want to learn, we would have a very different world very soon. Difficult, of course, yes, but there is a teacher here who is working on such a project right now, and of course the people that she's talking to are on the outside are quite mystified by this idea of opening up their businesses, for example, to kids and letting them in to hang out, take a hand, find out what's going on. But it would be rewarding in the end. But again, it doesn't have to happen overnight. It doesn't have to happen in the entire world. It can happen locally, happen in a few square blocks. See what happens. Not going to kill anybody. Can't do worse.
Well, not because of what you just said, but quite seriously for all of what you say, if your books were really as widely read as I wish they were, I think most people here would agree that you would be considered to be the most dangerous man in the world right now. I'm very surprised that you're not yet. And by the way, being dangerous doesn't imply evil, but I think you will be thought of that way. I mean, you're calling for a revolution, nothing less. You refer to it in my Ishmael as a new tribal revolution. Tell us a little bit about the revolution. Obviously bloodless.
Obviously bloodless, yes. My new book is called Beyond Civilization, and the subtitle is The New Tribal Revolution. In the years since Ishmael came out, God knows, people have demanded to know how we could do anything and what we could do and what we should do. And I was really, Ishmael said, be inventive. You think of yourselves as inventive people, don't you? Well, be inventive. And I was not among, I don't know that I was among the first, but it took me a while to begin to become inventive myself. And the new tribal revolution is the way I became inventive. I know this much, that the tribe is for humanity what the pod is for whales, and what the band is for gorillas, and for the troop is for baboons. It is a social organization that has been given to us by natural selection, that has worked out through natural selection, so that it works for humans. The way that tribalism works for us, the way that the flock works for geese. It isn't something that we invented, sat down and legislated. And it worked for humans for a very long time, very, 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 very long time. And it still works wherever it is found, and it hasn't been destroyed yet. It still works. It isn't obsolete by any means. About 10,000 years ago, we and other people began experimenting with other organizations, which were invariably ended up being not tribal, but hierarchical. The Maya developed such a civilization, the Aztecs, the Olmec, people of Teotihuacan, and so on. And they, some of them are, as I said, the Olmec and the Maya and the people of Teotihuacan, all eventually said, this is no good. This is not for us. And they walked away from what they were doing. And the Aztecs did not, because they were interrupted. We don't know what the Aztecs might have done if they'd had the time. They were destroyed by us. And I found that a new bit of mythology is that it is part of our mythology that humanity had one invention to make in the field of social organization. We call it civilization. It was the one, and it is unsurpassable. There cannot be anything beyond what we call civilization. It's unthinkable. This is it. In 1 billion years, there will never be anything beyond civilization. Now, this, of course, is only this is just a belief. It isn't absolute truth. There's no scientific basis for this. This is mathematics. And so I began by saying, well, why not? Why shouldn't there be something beyond civilization? But if there is going to be something beyond civilization, let's think again about what worked for humanity for hundreds of thousands of years and millions of years, which is tribalism. So how do we reclaim our tribal basis for our lives in this situation? We can't do what the Maya did. They could walk away from their cities and melt into the jungle. Well, we can't do that. There are no jungles for us to melt into. We can't run off and become hunter-gatherers again or anything like that. So I began to explore a tribe is a social organization that is devoted to making a living in common. And I realized, I gave a couple examples I don't think I did. I'm not sure I had any examples in my Ishmael. It took me a while to realize that I did have another example, which is the circus. The circus is organized tribally. Not every circus. Some circuses, of course, are just big businesses like Barnum and Bailey and so on. But that if you find a small circus working anywhere, you're going to find a tribal organization, very much like a hunting-gathering tribe, where everybody does what they're good at, and it's not hierarchical. This is, well observed. Certainly, Aboriginal tribes are not hierarchical. They're very egalitarian. I'm afraid you'll have to wait until the year 2000 to go for the entire book, because it's not going to be out until then.
Speaking of the year 2000, with the new millennium very much upon us, we're hearing a lot of talk about one world government, one world economy, and so forth. It would seem to me that culturally you put forth the notion that we're already in a fundamentally one world situation, and in terms of the dominant cultural view. But what's your opinion of politicizing this and using it as an economic term and so forth, one world, applying that term to so many things, to thinking in terms of one world? Is this going to bode evil for us, and do we need to turn from this quickly?
Yes, the worst thing that we can do is to continue the tendency towards one world, a monoculture where everybody lives the same way. Now, in all of my books, I've made the point over and over again that there is no one right way for people to live. And I've nowhere say that the taker way is a bad way to live, or an evil way to live, or even a wrong way to live. The problem is that it won't work for 6 billion people to live this one way. If there were 600,000 people living this way, or 6 billion people living this way, there would be no problem in the world. Everything would be fine. At the moment, however, everyone in our culture is compelled to enter this taker prison. Our educational system is designed to keep them inside the prison. So I am, but again, part of the revolution, we didn't get to this, to talk about the revolution as such. Revolution, for most people, when they talk about revolution, they think of an uprising. I think of a revolt, of bloodshed and an overthrow and things like that, and I'm not talking about anything like that at all. There is not going to be any such overthrow, nor would that be any point. Revolution, in that traditional sense, is always a matter of putting one group that is in power out of power and putting another group into power. And power is irrelevant here. The problem is not who is in power. We will be able to begin and carry this revolution on regardless of where we live or what sort of government there is. We don't care what kind of government there is, and we don't need to change the government. We basically need to ignore the government, and the government will ignore us too, because I'm not talking about terrorism. I have no sympathy for terrorism. See no point to it ultimately, but that's certainly not what I'm talking about. And so we can, and everywhere where people begin to live a different way, they are working against this notion of one world with everyone living exactly the same way. A very significant part of what I'm saying, the most difficult part of all, I think, in some ways, is that mother culture teaches that not only is there nothing thinkably beyond this, what we have is the sweetest and best thing that is imaginable. Nothing could be better than what we have. I think this is a wonderful con job. This is just remarkable that we have been able to teach ourselves this. It's amazing to me. And so when you talk to people about something new, they immediately say, well, yeah, you mean we're going to give up this, give up all this wonderful stuff. And so Mother Culture says anything other than this would be a come down. And of course, the point in all my books is we should be looking for a come up. And I'm only interested in a come up for people, better life for people, not giving up things. I have no interest in giving up things. It's not about giving up things. It's about getting something better that people really, 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 really want and need.
What about the tendency that seems to exist in people for what is called totemism, a totemistic way of viewing things? I wonder because, well, in other words, you talk about there's no one right way for people to live. I think this is a compelling and wonderful notion. But experience, it seems to me, shows that even people who probably would grasp what you're talking about in Ishmael to a large extent might nevertheless decide in some perverted way to formalize it into a movement with leaders and so forth, would then want to tell people who didn't follow it that they're living incorrectly. I mean, it seems to be human nature to imbue whatever it is, whether it's an idea, a flag, a religion, a philosophy. We anthropopathize them with our own qualities. So we decide that there's a God, and then because we have jealousy, therefore he's a jealous God, and therefore if anyone worships in a different way, we need to destroy their temples, we need to kill them so they don't build new temples. If people have different political views, we fight with them. How do we avoid the totemizing of your revolution?
To begin, I would say it's certainly not human nature. When missionaries went into lands where primitive people were found, they found that these people didn't know right from wrong. They didn't understand this business about right and wrong. It was mysterious to them. It's mysterious to me. I don't know right from wrong, but probably, I don't know, do most of you, do you know right from wrong? If you went into a courtroom and they said, are you insane? Do you know right from wrong? Can you tell right from wrong? Okay, you know, how many people know that abortion is wrong? How many know that abortion is right? How many know that capital punishment is right? How many know that capital punishment is wrong? If you go through the list, you find that people who know right from wrong don't seem to know. They know, I know what's right, but this person says something different. How can that be? If there is such a thing as right and wrong, how can there be any argument about it? In Beyond Civilization, in writing that book, I made a new discovery, which is that in Ishmael, when it came down to trying to formulate the weaver story the way that I'd formulated the taker story, I didn't do an outstanding job in that book. And it was partly because I was thinking, I was trying to find a point-for-point comparison between the two stories. And in writing this book, it came to me at last that the story that they were living is, there is no one right way for people to live. That was their story, is their story. Because what you found is that you had them living side by side, and the Navajo didn't say to the Hopi, you have the wrong religion, you're not doing things the right way, you should not be handling divorce the way you do, you should not be letting people behave the way they do, we have the right way, and you should be living the way we live. They didn't do it. They didn't do it. They didn't believe. They didn't have the notion that they had somehow or other discovered the one right way for people to live. So, really all I can say is that anyone who takes what I'm saying and makes it into a one right way for people to live is obviously taken it and distorted it and twisted it into something that I wouldn't recognize myself.
Let me bring us full circle, if I may, Daniel. We've called this session Hope. And we've gone through a few questions and your very thoughtful and provocative responses. And I hope all of you will forgive me. There is no way of doing this properly. It's such an immense area to consider. I mean, there's so much material, and every page of these wonderful books opens up thinking and ideas on yet more material, as I'm sure Daniel is painfully aware from all the work that went into writing. I mean, when you think of Daniel Quinn having written thousands of pages, then pushing them aside to try to get this right, to get it where it could be communicated, this does not lend itself to sound bites and a quick study. But I'm going to ask anyway, if you can sum up some portion of the session here tonight. Specifically, what is the hook? What do you tell these people? You don't want them to become leaders and revolutionaries in the traditional sense, terrorists. We're not looking for them to run up and down the street with placards protesting and so forth. What does each of us do if we believe in your vision, which I think is a grand vision? But how do we proceed?
This, of course, is the top question, received thousands of times, and it's taken me a long time to really formulate an answer that makes sense, because it's so important. People do want to do something, and but they ask me what, and this is the reason they ask me this is that, again, we come up against something, one of Mother Culture's teachings, which is that individually you are helpless. One thing I ask a crowd is, were you ever told as a young person, you can't change the world? Did you ever hear that when you were a child? Who do you think you are? You can't change the world. I did, certainly, and many crowds I've been in, they have heard that. The people who change the world are the people that we elect to office. Right? So we just have to wait for them to do something. Oh, wow. Not much hope there. So it is a matter of empowering ourselves and having a new idea of what doing something means, which is something that I cannot tell you right now. I can't tell what you can do and you can do and you can do and you can, because it isn't all the same. Just as there aren't 10 things that we all do that are bad for the world. It isn't that there is some list of them. It is each of us living in our own way, hammering on the world in our own way. And to reverse this is also a matter of individually. It isn't that there are 10 good things to do to save the world. I'm afraid they're just not there. There are 6 billion things to do. You're one, and you're one, and you're one, and you're one. I can count up to 6 billion, and it's the 6 billion who have to change. So I think I'll have to leave that one as far as I can go with that one.